Thank you, Peter. I'm going to be reading from my novel in progress. It's called The Devil's Bathtub, and it's an American songbird and Indian gangster novel, and it spans 15 years of my protagonist Raju's life, and it's set in Bombay, New York City, and Rochester. My first excerpt is going to be the songbirds, and then I'll do an excerpt of the gangster chapters. Thank you. Somebody shoved her. She was falling. Was it a dream? Had her father returned and was playing with her? She heard loud noises. Was that evil cackling or the cry of a red-shouldered hawk? She opened her eyes and her wings came out. But before she could look up, she heard Jay, 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 and she knew who was making the call, the only songbird species among them who could perfectly imitate the call of a red-shouldered hawk and did so to intimidate and scare them. The titmouse flew back onto the red oak she'd fallen asleep in. You've got 24 hours to leave, Ida's fresh snow-bellied blue jay said to her, and she felt ill. Her father had been right about their intention to run them out of their homeland. The other blue jays accompanying fresh snow-bellied blue jay were older, probably closer to her father's age. They wouldn't look at her or speak, even when she begged them for news of her missing father. Yeah, get it, Whitest fresh snow-bellied blue jay called out to a gang member raiding a neighboring purple martin's nest. The martins cried out in rending voices. They dove down, wingtips desperately clutching at the air, but were too late. Their unhatched eggs smashed into the ground and was spattered everywhere. The male wrapped his wings around his mate, who stomped the land as she tore at the feathers on her head, inconsolable. The blue jay gang jeered, whistled, and hammered their beaks loud while on perch. Below, the yellow yolks, the lives that could have once taken wing, leaked and seeped into the earth as their mother and father watched. Okay, now the gangster chapter. Excerpt. At noon on July 31st, 1985, the day before he would turn 18 years old, Raju sat cuffed to a chair in the visitors' gallery of Boribandar Juvenile Justice Home. His right wrist was cuffed to the right arm of the chair, his left wrist to the left arm of the chair, and similarly his ankles were cuffed to either chair leg. The keys were with Family Man Bastard, or perhaps with one of the other guards. There were 4 bastards in total, who ran the juvenile prison. As time ticked by in that brightly lit room, Raju stared at the visitors' gallery door and concentrated on keeping his tongue from investigating the bobby pin in his mouth. The visitor he was waiting for was his last chance to avoid tomorrow's transfer to Bombay's most notorious adult prison, Arthur Road Jail. A cement wall with mesh windows cut through the middle of the visitors' gallery, dividing the room into 2 parts, the juvie side and the free side. Raju was on the juvie side, a 10-foot square room, entirely bare, except for his chair, which was in the center of the room, a symmetry he appreciated. Through the mesh windows of the wall, he could see the free side. It was a much larger space, adorned with framed prints of Lord Shiva playing a flute and the dome of a mosque under a crescent moon. And furniture, a clock, a ceiling fan, and windows, barred windows, that faced the outdoors. They would have been welcomed by any other juvie except him, for through those windows he could hear the crows outside cawing. Raju tilted back the chair on its hind legs. He hissed at the cuffs, burning pressure into the raw impressions on his ankles and wrists, and the immense effort it took to balance the chair on 2 legs without toppling over. He needed to do this to view the clock on the free side. It was a Casio clock, cheap, white, round, with black Roman numbers. Raju loved it. In his cell, there was neither window nor clock to track the passage of time. Casio told him he'd been waiting 2 hours and 34 minutes. If his expected visitor didn't appear in 26 minutes, Raju had decided that he would break out. Waiting any longer risked crashing into 3 p.m. when visiting hours ended and one of the 4 bastards came by to lock up. 7 months of isolation, with the 4 bastards as his only human contact, had left Raju in a fragile state of mind. He doubted whether he could actually handle another escape attempt from Bori. His other 2 failed attempts had brought him beatings from the bastards that had left wild scars all over his back and legs. But he had to try. Otherwise, tomorrow when he turned 18, he'd be transferred to Arthur Road Jail. From there, he'd never be able to get his parents the vengeance they deserved. They had been killed, murdered, qatled, words he never thought he'd use for his mother Sita and his father Sham. In his heart, he loved them equally, yet always his mind went to Mom first and then to Papa. From what he could make out of the crime scene, that had been the order in which they'd been killed. "Shut up!" he yelled at the birds. The bobby pin slipped out of his mouth and he sucked it back in quick. He had to keep calm and hang on to his only means of escape if his visitor didn't show. Not that calm was possible with those damned crows outside. Unlike his cell, in here the afternoon sun shone through those barred windows on the free side. Unlike his cell, garish light poured out from the fluorescent fixture in the ceiling above him. All the light flooded the room, bouncing off the whitewashed walls and the concrete floor, blinding him, putting every inch of him on display, shoving him into high alert. Then the smell. It smelled so strongly of phenol he couldn't even smell himself, which made him feel untethered to from his body, like he could float out through those barred windows. He grabbed the arms of the chair. The clink of his cuffs reminded him he was very much in juvenile prison, cuffed to a chair, waiting for a visitor who might not show. The visitor Raju was expecting was Iqbal, a bhai of the city's most powerful gang. Only the Bombay Dawn of the international organization that was D Company had enough clout to spring Raju from Bori. But as Casio ticked on and the bobby pin in his mouth lost more of its metallic taste, Raju started to believe that Iqbal wasn't coming. He grunted and began to tilt backward to check the time. A door banged somewhere. The noise came to him over the crows. He crashed the chair back on the ground and froze, listening for footsteps he wouldn't hear if the door thud had been made by a juvie, since none of them had any shoes. He wouldn't hear Iqbal either, unless Bhai had changed his signature white patent leather chappals. The only time Raju ever saw Iqbal's chappals dirty had been when a rival gang member had spattered blood on them. Raju imagined Bhai's white chappals were drenched in red on the night of his parents' qatls. His hands shook as he strove to stop thinking about them, rattling the chains on his wrists loud, though that didn't mask the cawing. It would be a miracle if he heard any of the bastard's shoes over that racket. He sucked in air, thinking how the furious cawing was proof yet again that truth lurked in his fear of birds, that his unshakable belief was correct. Whenever they appeared in his life, birds were, indeed, harbingers of doom. Bracing himself for the pain and discomfort, Raju tilted backward for what felt like the 100th time. Casio told him 24 minutes were left before his 3 p.m. deadline. Raju brought the chair back down to rest and thought of before. Not before the murders, when he'd been a scholarship boy at the private Jesuit-run camping school, but the before of right now. Before the crows had knifed their way into his life, and before he was cuffed to an armchair in the visitors' gallery waiting for a no-show visitor. Raju thought of before, when a yawning family man bastard had arrived at his cell. He was the shortest of the 4 bastards, but well-built with enviable biceps. His eyes were small, sunken in, but his nose made up for that with its prominence. It seemed to be what led him forward, the rest of him in perpetual catch-up. Seeing that eminent feature in the doorway of his cell, really it was like the beak of a shoebill stork. God, how he hated birds. Yes, family man bastard's nose was like a dirty old Kolhapuri closed-toed chapel. And on observing it, Raju had stood back in shock, chest constricting, back tingling. "I'm here to take you to your meeting with Iqbal Bhai," said the guard. Raju stared dumbly. He hadn't seen him since a couple of months when he delivered the worst beating Raju had gotten within Bori. And why would Iqbal Bhai come into Bori himself instead of sending some junior underling? As family man bastard walked Raju to the visitors' gallery, he explained that Raju could be waiting a while as they ran through the appropriate security measures to ensure Iqbal Bhai's safety within Bori. That he was being given information and ever so readily further stunned Raju. He sought reasons for the guard's behavior. He was sleepy. He faintly smelled of pea shit and baby powder. His new baby had probably softened him. But the god had an older son, so he'd been the only family man amongst the gods long before the new baby. Then Raju could have kicked himself for being so dense. Family man bastard was being reasonable because of Raju's connection to Iqbal Bhai. The two of them had come upon the crows in the courtyard of Bori, pecking at a rat carcass. Raju felt faint. His knees buckled, he crouched down. The birds meant one thing and one thing only. Bhai was going to kill him and wrap up the final loose end of his parents' qatls. "Arey ut jao," said the guard, pulling on Raju's arm. "I said get up. What's wrong with you about birds?" Please, Raju said, knees smashing into the earth, thankful for the friction, the pebbles cutting into his skin, leaching his blood into the mud, which meant one thing and one thing only. He wasn't advancing toward the death the black-winged creatures promised him. Kya, said the guard. Raju raised his chin and voice. Please, sir, can we just forget the meeting? The tug on his arm stopped, and Raju hoped his wish would be granted. Then Family Man Bastard opened his mouth and released a stream of pond saliva at the crows. Red-brown tobacco and beetle leaf juice laced with cardamom powder and maybe some coconut arced toward the black creatures. They scattered. Spittle hit the bloody rat carcass. Family Man Bastard looked at him, expectantly it seemed. Raju congratulated him. Shabash, sir. Chup raho, let's go, the guard replied, stroking the baton strapped to his waist. A misdirection because he grabbed Raju by the ear. His ear felt raw, on fire, like at any moment the lobe would detach from his head. Fat covered with skin would give up that easily. And yet Raju dragged his bare feet. The suddenness of it. Birds on his path ahead. Birds in the air, birds cawing, him horrified, frozen to the ground. One moment incessant, deafening cawing, and the next a total quiet, barely compromised by the hush-hush of beating wings. Chilling, penetrating the inner recesses of his consciousness like some untraceable lethal poison. He tried reasoning that since Family Man Bastard destroyed the omen, it surely meant that the meeting with Iqbal would go well, that he'd be saved from adult prison. But he couldn't suppress the fear. Those vile, disgusting winged creatures had brought him nothing but death and ruin, torturing him since his parents' murders at the hand of Iqbal Pai. And Raju had naively thought that being orphaned in that macabre way was hell. Then Iqbal had shown him a truer hell by framing him for his parents' couples. For 3 years, Raju, the prime and only police suspect in his parents' double homicide, hid on Bombay streets while Iqbal hunted him. Curiously, though, when a chance civilian sighting brought him into Bori and he had figured a D Company member would finish him, nothing happened. Over time, he assumed that Iqbal was too busy becoming the Bombay Pie of D Company to worry anymore about small fry like him. But now he wondered, what could Iqbal possibly want in return for springing him from Bori? Something big? Something only Raju could give him? But what exactly? As soon as the guard had lugged them to a safe enough distance, the birds reassembled, and it picked up again.